The morning came in blue and brittle, the kind of cold that slips into the bones like regret. Frost glazed the scrub grass outside, and the hills were still cloaked in mist. Wind hadn't risen yet, just silence and the hush of winter breathing down the neck of the land. Bo Carter stirred under his wool blanket before the sun climbed the ridge. Same ache in his shoulder, same stiffness in his knees, same cracked roof overhead. Another day that likely held more worry than worth. He sat at the edge of the cot in his one-room house, boots stiff as boards. Outside, the horses would be waiting. They always were. Hungry, same as him. Bo didn't talk much, not to people, not even to the mule, and that suited him fine. Words had become expensive things in a town where opinions were cheap. 3 years of failed rains had dried up not only his fields, but the way folks used to nod at him in the general store. He still had the land, barely. Still had the barn, barely. Still had pride, though even that felt like a luxury on most days. The barn door creaked before he touched it. Strange. He paused, listened. Inside, there was breathing. Not the kind a horse made. Softer. Human. He stepped in slow, boot soles silent on packed earth. The stale warmth of old hay met his nose, familiar and dry. But there, near the back, where the bales were stacked like fortress walls, a shadow moved. Then another. 2 women, huddled close, wrapped in someone's discarded coat and what looked like traveling skirts streaked in dirt and ash. One was asleep, the younger maybe. The other, older, still younger than him, watched him like a deer with a raised rifle. Eyes dark and wide, hands steady despite the cold. He didn't move, just looked, and she stared back, like she'd already measured what kind of man he was before he said a word. "You've got until sundown," Bo said quietly, voice hoarse from disuse. "Then you're gone." The older woman nodded once. No argument. No plea. "Do you have names?" he asked, more out of custom than curiosity. She stood slowly, letting the blanket slide from her shoulders. Her jaw was sharp, her cheeks windburned, but her spine held straight like she'd never been bowed by anyone or anything. "Elsie," she said, "and my sister Josie." Bo glanced at the younger one, curled like a pup, cheeks flushed, breathing shallow. "You sick?" he asked. "Cold," Elsie answered. "We walked too far, and the man who was supposed to take us further didn't wait." He said nothing, just looked again at the barn's thin walls, the broken slats near the roof, the scrawny hen roosting like it still believed in spring. "Where were you headed?" "Silver Hollow," she said. "There were men there waiting. Or supposed to be." Bo shook his head, lips pressing flat. Nothing in Silver Hollow but liquor and mines and men with fists for manners. "I know," she said. "They didn't ask to stay." That struck him. No begging. No tears. Just 2 women caught between winter and nowhere. He reached into the barn's small tool shelf and brought out a kettle. Walked across the yard to the house, filled it, set it on the stove. Minutes later, he returned with tin cups and bitter, black coffee that steamed into the air like forgiveness. He handed one to Elsie. Her fingers brushed his, cold as nails. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded once, then turned and left them there with the silence and the hay. The day unfolded the way most did. He mended a fence near the southern pasture, found a coyote print in the mud, and muttered a curse under his breath. Come afternoon, clouds gathered in the west like a threat. By sundown it'd snow. He lit the lantern on the porch and stared at the barn through the gloom. Just wood and roof and worn hinges, but now something lived inside it besides mice and memory. He thought of going back out, telling them again to leave. But he didn't. Instead, he warmed a pan of beans and bacon ends and set half aside in a tin. Then, without ceremony, he left it by the barn door, said nothing, waited for nothing, went back to the house and sat with the silence. He wasn't afraid of strangers. He just didn't know how to carry them anymore. Folks let you down, or worse, needed more than you had to give. And Bo Carter didn't have much left, just his land, the animals, a few debts, and the memory of a brother buried 5 winters ago. The next morning, the snow had started falling, light like ash, and the tin was empty. He found Elsie standing near the barn wall, gathering small branches into her arms. She wasn't idle. She looked purposeful, like she'd already decided how the day would go and what work she could do. He didn't speak, just nodded. Later, he saw her sweeping out the shed. Josie was quieter, slower, coughing sometimes. But she still tried, carried water in trembling arms, patted the mule's nose like she missed softness in her life. And Bo watched them from the porch. Something about their presence, unspoken, unrushed, settled into the rhythm of his days without protest. On the third morning, a rider came. Reverend Holt. Polite knock. Hat in hand. A man of the book and of the town's tangled conscience. "You've got guests," the Reverend said lightly, eyes drawn to the barn. Strange for a man alone. Bo didn't answer. "I've heard things," the Reverend went on. "So have others. I'm sure it's innocent. But talk grows legs faster than truth does." Bo sipped his coffee. "They'll leave soon," he said. The Reverend shifted. "Just be careful, son. A man's name can be harder to clean than his floorboards." When the preacher left, Bo stared long at the horizon. Snow had thickened in the clouds, and something in his chest twisted like a knot come too tight. That night, Elsie came to the porch. She didn't sit, just stood there, arms folded, hair pulled back in a braid that looked like it had been done with fingers too cold to care. "You want us gone?" she asked. He didn't look at her, just kept staring at the fire dying in the hearth inside. "I don't know what I want," he said. She nodded, took that like gospel, began to turn. "Josie," he said quietly. "She's not well." "No," Elsie agreed. He looked at her then, really looked, saw the lines by her mouth, the tightness around her eyes, the steadiness in her stance. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "No," she echoed again. And yet she didn't walk away. They stood in the cold a long time, not speaking, not touching, just sharing the air between them like it was something sacred and barely enough. When she finally went back into the barn, Bo watched her go. And somewhere beneath the old roof of his ribs, something small and unfamiliar stirred. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of something warm enough to melt a little frost. And by morning, he'd find the broken trough mended with planks she'd salvage herself. Silent thanks, or perhaps a promise. The snow came soft that night, not a storm, just a steady hush. It layered the barn roof like a quiet warning, and iced the water trough Bo had meant to empty. Morning brought no sun, just dull gray light that pressed low over the hills. He stepped out into the yard with a shawl of sleep still clinging to him, boots crunching frost. The barn looked unchanged, but he knew better. Some things shift without sound, like a fence post easing from the earth, or a woman deciding. Elsie was up before him. She was splitting kindling near the shed, sleeves rolled, breath puffing clouds into the cold. The old axe looked too large in her hands, but she made do, steady and precise. "Don't remember asking you to do chores," Bo said as he passed. "You didn't," she replied, not looking up. "But we're not thieves. We slept under your roof." He didn't argue, just kept walking. By midday, the wind had risen, not sharp but insistent. A sifting chill crept under doorframes and found skin no matter how many layers you wore. Inside the barn, Josie sat by the stove Bo had left out there years ago. A squat iron thing rusted at the base, but still good at its purpose. The kettle sang gently. She held her hands over the warmth like a prayer. She looked up as he entered, tried to sit straighter, but a cough shook her thin frame before she could finish the motion. "You're sick," Bo said plainly. Josie offered a wan smile. "Only a little." He looked toward Elsie, who was now mending the strap on a saddle with needle and thread like she'd been born doing it. "You two always travel with a sewing kit?" he asked. Elsie didn't pause. "It came with the dress. They sell 'em like that sometimes. Stitching's poor. Has to be redone." He took a moment to let that sink in. Dresses packaged like gear. Brides bundled like winter supplies. "You ever make it to Silver Hollow?" he muttered. "Don't stay long." Elsie's hands kept working, but her voice softened. "We were never meant to stay. Josie was promised to a man there. I was an extra, in case the first didn't work out." Bo blinked. That's not how marriage is supposed to work. Elsie looked up, expression unreadable. It is when you're a burden to a family and nearing 30. He felt the sting of that, though she didn't say it to wound. Just a truth laid out flat and quiet. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Elsie poured him a cup without asking, handed it to him as though they'd known each other longer than a week. He took it, nodded. They sat like that for a while. Him on a crate, her on a bale, Josie half asleep, but listening with that deep kind of stillness that sick folk develop when conserving energy becomes instinct. No one filled the silence with nonsense. There was comfort in that. Later, as Bo finished splitting more firewood behind the house, he noticed something that stopped him mid-swing. Elsie had taken a scrap of flour sack and stitched it into a curtain for the barn's east-facing window. Just a square, but it dulled the glare and held warmth a little longer. No announcement. No seeking thanks. He remembered his mother once saying some women don't fix things with talk, they mend with hands, with time, with patience no one sees until it's missing. That evening, he found himself hesitating with the door latch. Inside his own home. Strange. He made stew with the last onions and a piece of salted pork too small to matter on its own. Let it simmer long enough to soften the bitterness. Then spooned it into 2 bowls and walked them to the barn without knocking. Elsie met him at the door. She didn't smile, but her eyes warmed a little. "I'll wash these in the morning," she said. He nodded, turned to go. "You're not what I expected," she added. He paused. "You mean meaner?" "No," she said after a beat. Sadder. That stuck with him more than it should have. By the next day, Josie was worse. The cough deepened, her voice rasped. Elsie bundled her in every scrap they owned and fed her sips of warm broth. When Bo offered to ride into town for laudanum, Elsie shook her head. "She'll mend. She just needs rest." "You a doctor now?" he asked, half teasing. "No, just a woman who's nursed others." There was something in her tone that spoke of back rooms and blood, of quiet endurance, of knowing when to stay and when to leave. He didn't press. Instead, he brought her a pair of gloves from his brother's old trunk. She took them without ceremony. Later that night, Bo stood by the house window and watched the barn through snow flurries. A light glowed faint behind the slatted walls. Not a fire, just the stove. But it was enough to make the barn look alive, like it belonged to someone again. He wondered when that had last been true. The preacher returned on horseback near sundown the next day. He didn't dismount. Just passing through, Reverend Holt called out, "Thought I'd check if your guests have moved on." "They haven't." The preacher adjusted the reins. "You mean for them to stay?" Bo met his gaze. "Mean for the snow to stop?" "No, but I won't put a sick girl out into it. Folks are watching, Bo." "I know." The preacher sighed. "Just be careful. You were raised better." Bo didn't answer. He just turned and walked back toward the barn. Inside, Elsie had set up a little shelf from planks and nails. There were 2 tin cups, folded cloths, a cracked mirror. A woman's effort to make something feel like home, even if temporary. She looked up as he entered. "The preacher came," he said. She didn't flinch. "They always do. Eventually." He hesitated, then added, "He thinks I'm being foolish." "Are you?" "Don't know yet." They stood like that for a moment. Her coat was patched at the elbow. His hands were raw from rope burn. Both of them people too used to being misunderstood by others, and too stubborn to ask for kindness. "You planning on staying long?" he asked. Elsie tilted her head. "Depends." "On what?" "On whether this is just shelter, or if it might be something else." He didn't ask what she meant. Not yet. Maybe he was afraid of the answer. Or maybe he just liked the quiet hope in her voice. That night, he left the barn door slightly ajar behind him. A gesture. Not an invitation. Not yet. But maybe a beginning. The days settled into a rhythm, as if winter had decided not to be cruel, but merely persistent. The snow no longer shocked them. It simply was. A constant hush underfoot. Cold clung to the window panes and turned the barn into a cave of breath and shadow. But inside there was warmth. Not much, but enough. Enough to dry boots and thaw hands. Enough for silence to be companionable, not sharp. Bo didn't ask questions. Elsie didn't volunteer answers. That was the agreement, unspoken. But there were things that hung in the air all the same, unwritten, unsaid. He watched her fix the fence one morning, gloved fingers tugging wire tight, as if she'd done it all her life. Her shoulders worked smooth, her movements calm. Not afraid of work. Not afraid of silence. Not afraid of him, either. Josie had taken to sleeping late, curled under every blanket they had, pale as the snow outside. She was mending, but slowly. Elsie barely left her side after dusk. Still, in the daylight, she worked, gathering eggs, stacking wood, sewing up the torn hem of Bo's old flannel without comment. It wasn't gratitude, he could tell. It was just how she lived. You contributed. You made the place better than you found it, even if the place had never asked for you. One afternoon, as they both bent to lift a broken plank from the porch, Elsie paused and leaned on her knees, breathing shallow. "You all right?" Bo asked, wary. She nodded, just stood too fast. But he saw something shift in her expression. That flicker. Not pain, exactly, but the memory of it. He watched her more after that. Not out of suspicion. Out of concern. Interest. Whatever word made the looking feel less dangerous. She rarely touched him. But once, as they passed in the barn, her hand grazed his forearm. It lingered half a second too long to be accident. Just enough to leave warmth. Later that evening, when Josie had gone quiet in sleep and the fire in the stove had died down to coals, Elsie came outside. He was splitting kindling again, though he had enough for days. Habit more than need. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him and watched his hands. The axe rose, fell. Split wood cracked open like bone. "Where'd you learn to do all this?" he asked, setting a piece aside. Elsie didn't answer right away. She picked up a small log and turned it over in her hands like it held a secret. "My father ran a small mill," she said finally, "until he died. Then my uncle took us in. Me and Josie." She didn't look at him, just at the wood. "Was he kind?" Bo asked, voice low. She gave a brittle smile. "Kind enough to keep a roof over our heads. Not kind enough to let us stay without becoming useful." He waited. Let her shape the silence as she needed. "I was 18 when he started arranging suitors. I refused most. Refused all. I was too blunt. Too proud. Too sharp at the edges. One man said I looked at him like I was weighing whether he was worth the breath it took to speak." Bo huffed through his nose. "And was he?" She smiled then, real if faint. "No." He leaned the axe against the porch rail. "So you came west?" "No," she said softly. "Not yet. First, I fell in love." Bo didn't move. He was a schoolteacher. Tall. Soft-spoken. Said he liked the way I thought. Said he wanted a wife with opinions. She sat then on the edge of the porch, hands in her lap, shoulders drawn in like she'd folded herself smaller over time. "We were engaged. For a year. Then he took a job in Kansas City. Said he'd send for me. But letters got fewer. Then stopped. Finally, a package arrived." She stopped. Bo said nothing. In it was my mother's handkerchief, and the ring I'd given him when he proposed. She let the quiet stretch between them, pulled it close like a shawl. "No note." "Oh, there's a note," she said. "From his new bride." She apologized. Said he felt guilty, but it was better this way. Bo's jaw clenched, slow. "I didn't cry," Elsie whispered. "I just walked out to the shed, scrubbed the floor, baked 2 loaves of bread, and never said a word about it. Not until now." He sat down beside her, close, but not touching. "They sent me west after that," she said. "Said it was time to stop dreaming. I was nearly 30. Josie wouldn't last without me, and I'd wasted all my chances. They told me I could at least make something of myself in the territories. Start over. We were meant to meet a rancher, Clyde Maddox, but he never showed. Left us at a depot with a name and 2 sandwiches." She turned to him then. No tears. No theatrics. Just the steady look of someone tired of carrying silence. "You asked why I came," she said. "Now you know." Bo didn't speak. just reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a small carving knife. Nothing fancy, just a handle worn from years of use. "I don't have much," he said slowly, "but I know what it is to be left behind." She didn't flinch at that. "People talk about starting over like it's easy," she murmured. "But all I ever wanted was to be enough the first time." He nodded. "I think maybe you were. They just weren't worth what they were asking for." The moon hung low behind them, barely visible through the clouds. A coyote called out somewhere beyond the hills. Still, they didn't move. Elsie leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "I'm not asking anything from you, Bo. Just—" "I know. And I don't expect kindness," she added. "Not in this world." "That's a shame," he said, "because it's all I've got left." She looked at him then, not like a woman waiting for rescue, but like someone recognizing another survivor in the wreckage. "Then maybe," she said softly, "we can trade what we have, even if it's not much." He nodded, and the night, once so cold, seemed a little softer after that. Not warm, not safe, but changed. In the barn, Josie stirred. Outside, the wind quieted. Bo stood first, offered his hand to help her up. She took it. And for the first time since they'd met, Elsie didn't look like she was waiting for winter to end. She looked like someone who might weather it. The snow returned with a bitterness it hadn't shown before, sharp, unrelenting, flung sideways by the wind like it was chasing people out of the land itself. Everything disappeared under the whiteness. The fence lines, the creek's edge, even time. Bo moved slower these days, not from age, but caution. The world was fragile beneath the snow. One wrong step, and things could splinter. Elsie moved through it like she belonged there. Her coat flared at the hem, skirts heavy with damp, cheeks pink from cold. Each morning she shoveled a path to the barn without asking. Each evening she stood by the stove, coaxing warmth from wood and memory. Josie's cough had lessened, but she was still pale, still unsure of her own steps, and Elsie kept near as though tethered. The days inside were quieter now, not just from winter, but from something more fragile, something shifting. Then came the talk. It started small, as things like this always do. Miss Pretty, the laundress, passed Bo at the general store and tilted her chin just a little too high. "Hope your barn's staying warm," she said, folding linens too tightly. "Wouldn't want young ladies catching another chill out there." The store clerk, red-eared and always half-listening, chuckled into his crate of beans. Bo said nothing. He just paid for salt and coffee and left before the next whisper formed. But by the next week, Reverend Holt returned. This time he did dismount. His coat was pressed and clean, his breath white in the air. "Some are beginning to talk, Bo," he said, eyes shifting toward the barn. "And what they say, it's not kind." "I don't pay for talk," Bo answered. "No, but your reputation might. And theirs. The women's." Bo leaned against the porch post, arms crossed. "They've done nothing wrong." "I don't doubt their decency," the preacher said, trying to soften his voice. "But it only takes a whisper. And I've heard more than one." Bo glanced toward the barn. Smoke curled from its chimney now. Elsie had patched the roof better than he ever had. There were no screams in that place. No scandal. Just two women surviving, and one man who hadn't turned them out. "I won't ask them to leave," Bo said simply. "I didn't say you should," the preacher replied, but the disappointment in his voice was thick as ash. When he rode away, the wind picked up again. Snow slapped against the windows. That night, Elsie stood at the stove in Bo's kitchen, rolling dough between her palms. Josie sat in the corner, wrapped in quilts, cheeks pink again. "He said folks are talking," Bo murmured, voice low. Elsie didn't stop rolling. "They always do. I just thought you should know." She pressed the dough flat against the tin. "They've called me worse than stray before." He didn't reply, only watched her press and fold. A woman who deserved no shame for simply being present in a man's house without a ring. He stepped closer, almost without thinking. "I can tell them you'll be gone soon," he offered, though it tasted. Elsie looked up. "Do you want me to be?" "No." She held his gaze longer than she ever had. There was something burning, quiet, behind her eyes. Not rage. Not sorrow. Something steadier. "Then don't lie on my behalf," she said. She wiped her hands, checked Josie's brow, and went back to the barn before he could answer. 3 days later, Clyde Maddox rode in. He was taller than Bo remembered, though that might have been the coat. He came in loud, boots stomping, voice already raised, like he had something to prove and not enough time to do it. "I heard there were 2 brides waiting in Silver Hollow," he said, slamming his saddlebag down on Bo's porch. "Paper says they were meant for me." Elsie stepped out from behind the door. She was calm. Josie peeked out from inside, quiet and pale. Bo kept his hands still, resting near the axe by the porch rail. "You left them behind," Bo said evenly. "Circumstances changed. Don't mean I gave up my rights." "They aren't rights," Elsie said. Her voice wasn't raised, but it carried more weight than Maddox's shouting ever could. "You paid for names on a paper," she continued. "That doesn't make you owner of 2 lives." "You were meant to be mine," Maddox spat. "Both of you. I sent money. I signed the registry." Bo moved forward, slowly, deliberately. "You want your money back, I'll give it," he said. "But you won't touch them." Maddox sneered. "So that's how it is. You keeping both? Or just the older one?" Bo didn't say a word. His fist did instead. The crack of bone rang out like a shot. Maddox stumbled backward, blood spilling from his lip. He didn't fall, just stared, stunned, like he hadn't believed anyone would stand in his way. "You'll ride out now," Bo said. "And you won't come back." Maddox held his jaw, glared, and spat onto the snow. "Filthy little charity," he growled at Elsie. "No wonder no man ever kept you." That was when Josie, from behind the door, stepped forward. Not close, just far enough for her voice to reach. "You weren't worth her," she said. "None of them were." Maddox looked between them, at the quiet fire in Bo's stance, at the steel in Elsie's posture, at the resolve in a girl who had been too sick to speak 2 weeks ago, and decided finally to ride off. When the dust settled, no one said a word. Elsie's breath trembled once. Josie sat back down slowly, and Bo watched the sky darken. That evening, the barn door creaked open. Elsie stood in the threshold, arms folded, hair coming loose around her face. She didn't thank him. She didn't apologize. She just looked at him like a question she wasn't sure she should ask. "I can't undo what they think," she said, "but I won't let it ruin you." He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "Don't care what they think. You should. This land, your name, it's all you've got. Then maybe it's time I risked it for something real." She swallowed. The silence between them pulsed like a heartbeat. "I don't want to be your problem," she said. "You're not. Or your guilt. You're not that either." She looked away, then back again. "Then what am I?" Bo didn't answer right away. He didn't know how. Words like that took time. And this wasn't the night for them. Not yet. Instead, he said something else. "You don't owe me marriage. Or a thanks. Just stay if you want." She watched him a moment longer. Then she stepped past him into the barn, where the warmth waited. And though nothing had truly been said, the air between them no longer felt like winter. Not quite. Snow melt came slow that year, as though the season couldn't quite bear to let go. The ground softened beneath its white crust, not with warmth, but with promise. Icicles wept along the eaves, and the sky brightened in hesitant pulses, like a child waking from a long illness. The ranch creaked back to life inch by inch, yet something beneath the thaw stirred faster than the land. It stirred in Elsie. She had begun to pack. Not loudly, not rashly, but Bo saw the shift. He noticed her stacking their meager belongings near the barn wall. A scarf folded tight, Elsie's stitching kit tucked inside a small bag. Josie's shoes cleaned, patched, and something in her posture, shoulders stiff, lips pressed firm, spoke of decisions already made. He didn't ask at first. He thought maybe it would pass. That it was just habit, left over from all the times she'd had to leave somewhere without saying goodbye. But the next morning, when he found her retying the straps on their single trunk, he said quietly, "You going?" Elsie stood still for a long time. She didn't turn. "I think we've taken enough." Taken. The word hit him sharp. "You didn't take anything." Her voice came soft, but not unsure. "We stayed longer than we should have. It's your name folks are whispering, not mine." "They've stopped whispering." "They haven't," she said. They've just lowered their voices." He moved closer, felt the space between them shift like it always did, warm and taut and full of everything they hadn't said aloud. "You think I care about the townsfolk more than I care about?" He stopped. Elsie turned to face him. Her face wasn't angry. It was resolved. "It's not about what you care about, Bo. It's about what you shouldn't have to lose for us." He shook his head. "I haven't lost a thing." Her eyes shimmered, not tears, but something more fragile. "I won't be the reason your land goes under, or the reason some fool with a grudge refuses to sell you seed come spring." Bo reached for the edge of the trunk. His fingers gripped the wood. Not hard, not possessive, just steady. "You think you're protecting me. I know I am." They stood in that stillness, winter and spring caught in the same breath. He looked at her, really looked. At the scar near her left knuckle, at the quiet fire in her eyes, at the way she carried strength like a shawl passed from her mother's shoulders to her own. "Then tell me," he said finally, "is leaving what you want?" Elsie blinked, slowly. "No," she whispered. "Then don't." "I don't know how to stay," she admitted. "Not in a way that doesn't cost someone else." He stepped closer. "Then let me pay that cost, if it means something that lasts." Josie appeared in the barn doorway just then. She leaned against the frame, thin but brighter now, her cheeks kissed with color again. Elsie turned, startled. "Josie, I told the schoolteacher about you," Josie said simply. Elsie's brows lifted. "What?" She was asking who helped me read when I was sick. Said they're looking to start a school. I told her you had patience and a voice that made books feel like stories, not chores. Elsie's hands fell to her sides. "She wants to meet you," Josie added, stepping forward. "Tomorrow if you're not leaving." Elsie looked from her sister to Bo, back to the trunk. "She came all the way here?" Elsie asked. Josie smiled, a little crooked. "Turns out news travels both ways." Elsie didn't respond. She just sat down on the edge of the trunk and stared at her folded gloves for a long while. Bo stepped back, letting the moment be hers. Letting her choose not out of fear, not out of obligation, but from whatever truth sat deepest in her chest. And slowly, slowly, Elsie untied the strap. That evening, the sun dipped behind the hills, staining the horizon gold. It was the first time in weeks Bo had seen color in the sky. The clouds were pale and bruised, as if the world had fought its own sorrow and won. The next morning, the schoolteacher came. Miss Eleonora, tall and practical, with boots caked in honest mud and kindness in her eyes. She sat with Elsie on the porch, asked questions, listened more than she spoke. Bo pretended not to watch from the shed, but his ears caught every word. "You've done more than most," Eleonora said, "and you did it in silence. That's the kind of person who can teach children without wounding them." Elsie flushed, fingers knotting in her skirt. "I'm no one special. Exactly the kind we need." Later, when the teacher left with a smile and an offer scribbled in ink, Elsie stood in the yard with Josie and didn't say a word for a long time. Just stared out across the hills, as if seeing them for the first time as something permanent. That night, Bo made stew again, and Elsie came inside the house like she belonged there, because she did. Josie sat near the fire, darning her socks with a needle Bo hadn't even known was missing from the drawer. The wind blew soft across the chimney. The smell of supper filled the room. Outside, the barn stood still, but not empty. It had become something more, sanctuary, maybe. A memory rooted in the ribs of the land. Elsie sat across from him at the table, then reached forward without fanfare and took his hand. "I still don't know how to stay," she said. "You don't have to," Bo murmured. "Just don't leave." She looked at him long, eyes deep with something neither of them dared name. Then she smiled, faint and true. The next week, the town held its spring gathering. Nothing grand, just stew pots, blankets, and a few fiddles under a sun that finally stayed. Elsie walked in beside Bo, not arm in arm, but close. Her hair was braided in a crown Josie had fussed over. Her dress was clean, her boots steady. Children gathered near her halfway through the afternoon. She sat with them in the shade of the old sycamore and told stories in a voice so soft. Grown men stopped mid-sentence just to listen. One mother, watching nearby, leaned toward Bo. She teachin' at the new school? Seems like it, he said. She's good. My daughter hasn't sat still that long in weeks. Bo smiled. She has a way. Elsie looked over just then and caught his gaze. She didn't blush, didn't look away. Just gave him a nod that said thank you, for the porch, for the barn, for not asking too much too soon. The sun began to fall behind the hills, golden light pouring like honey over the fields. Music rose, fiddles warm and wild. Josie danced with the preacher's boy, laughing like someone who'd never been sick a day in her life. Bo walked toward Elsie as the shadows lengthened. Do you regret it? He asked. She turned to him slowly. Regret what? Not leaving. She took a breath, one full and steady, like she was finally letting the land fill her lungs. No, she said. Not for a second. He nodded. Words weren't always needed between them. That was something rare, something worth holding on to. As the stars emerged, faint and quiet, Elsie leaned against him. Not because she needed to, because she chose to. And in a world that had measured her worth in dowries, distances, and disappointments, that choice was everything. Beneath the hush of music and murmur, beneath the frost-soft grass and warming earth, Bo Carter knew one truth. Sometimes the most surprising thing a woman could do wasn't run, or stay, or speak. It was to reach across all the pain and the silence and choose you freely. That was the choice he didn't see coming, and the one he'd never forget.